Welcome back to Toast to History. Now, my guest of honor today is an American president. But he's not a United States president. I present to you Jefferson Davis. Oh, the humanity. That's the reaction I thought I'd get. Reminds me of my love list. Now, Jackson ain't so bad now, is he?
Now that's good history.
Like I told you, that's the reaction I thought I would get from everybody. Controversy has surrounded this man everywhere he's gone. And today is his birthday, so you know what? We're not going to go over the traitor Jefferson Davis, because that's what you all know and that's what you all believe. But today, I'm going to tell you the Jefferson Davis you don't know. The American hero, Jefferson Davis. Now, at the end of my video, if you want to feel the same way you did, okay. But you need to know all the facts before you can make any decision. Wait a minute. Who's been messing with my stuff? That's not the Confederate flag. Why is this recognized as a flag of the Confederacy? Because Virginia, the Army of Northern Virginia, it was their battle flag. Most of the time they came north. Most of the time you see most of the battles, they were fighting the Army of Northern Virginia, who carried this flag. So, before you get offended, make sure you know what you're offended about. So now, I give you the real Confederate flag of the Confederate States of America. Jefferson Davis, he was the U.S. Senator from Mississippi twice. He was the U.S. Secretary of War. He was the United States Representative from Mississippi. He served in both the United States Army and the United States Volunteers. His highest rank, he became a colonel. He fought in the Black Hawk in the Mexican-American War. Jefferson Davis was the first and only president of the Confederate States of America. Jefferson Davis' early life, he was born in Kentucky. Now it's funny. Kentucky has seated two presidents. Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln. The two who would square off during the Civil War. That's funny right there. There's a stat for Kentucky. Now, he marries the daughter of Zachary Taylor. He's like, I don't know if I want my daughter marrying a military man. She's like, okay, and he resigns. He's like, I'm not really a huge fan of the military anyway. I'll resign. Yes, we can be together. And Zachary Taylor said, I still really am not a fan of you. Marry my daughter. Eventually, they get married anyway, even without his blessing. But they marry. He takes her back to his home in Mississippi. 3 months later, he's at his home in Mississippi. And they both get malaria. And they both battle the disease, and she eventually dies 3 months in. They've been married 3 months, she's dead. And he almost dies. He pretty much barely survives, and the effects of the disease stay with him his entire life, as well as the guilt of his wife dying. Now, he remarries. It takes 10 years later, but he does remarry. He finds Verena Howell. Now, she will be his wife for the rest of his life. They will have 6 kids. Only 3 of them, though, will make it to adulthood. He worked on a cotton plantation. He got this from his brother. His brother was a very rich benefactor and helped get him started at this cotton plantation before he went into politics. But in the 1830s, he takes a trip out to Washington. While he's there, he meets President Martin Van Buren. Now, he befriends him. They get along real great. And Martin Van Buren kind of gets the wheels turning. He starts to think about going into politics as a career. Now, Jefferson Davis, before the Civil War, was a hero for the American people. He went to West Point, which is one of the biggest military academies in the United States. He goes to learn to become a soldier. And he's not a very good one. Not a very good... Now, he becomes a good soldier, but at the academy, he's known for Van Wilder type of shenanigans. There's a tavern right outside of West Point where a lot of the soldiers will sneak to go, and several times he gets caught at this tavern. But every time when they go to their tribune, he finds some way to get off with only a few demerits, because never do they get him caught in the act of drinking the alcohol. The head chairman gets so upset that he gets rid of eggnog even for Christmas. He wants no alcohol on the base at all. So they create a ring where they have eggnog and they're making it their own inside the barracks. And Davis does not get caught, even though he was one of the guys who started it, but several classmates get caught. And as they're investigating, they get more and more and more classmates to get caught in this thing, where it gets to the point where the guy knows, if I expel all these guys, it's going to really hit the school hard. So he kind of brushes it underneath the rug. After West Point, he, like I told you, meets Van Buren and gets into politics. He serves in the Senate. He serves in the House. He serves in Congress. Now, he's in Congress. The Mexican War breaks out. And he went to West Point. So he resigns his commission in Congress to go fight. He's like, I won't go anywhere where I'm needed. And he felt he was needed more in the war than he was in Congress. He goes to Mississippi and he gets put as colonel of these own volunteer of Mississippi riflemen. He goes down there, and his commanding officer ends up being Zachary Taylor. Hi, Dad. I'm sorry I missed the last reunion. His late wife's father that disagreed with them getting married. And at first, it is not a great reunion. But both are professionals, and they both act as such. As the war goes on, he performs very well. His Mississippians perform very well, and he starts to raise up the ranks and shows as a very fine officer. And him and Zachary Taylor kind of put their issues aside, and they bond, and they kind of make amends with each other. And they do very well. Also, during there, he gets wounded. He gets shot by a bullet that hits his spur, and the spur digs into his heel, and they have to rip the brass out of his heel. And he ends up with a limp most of his life, and it always would bother him. But the war ends. He comes back a war hero. Taylor comes back a war hero. So he's a hero in Mississippi. He's a hero to the nation. Zachary Taylor gets voted into president. He goes back to Congress. And he becomes an advisor to Zachary Taylor during his presidency. Now, we all know Taylor only lasts a month, so not a lot comes to fruition. Not a lot of help comes Davis's way. But there's still like, wow, he was advisor to a man who, you thought there was going to be problems. As we say, he returns to Congress after the war is over. war hero. And secession talks continue and continue and continue. During his entire time in Congress, he preaches the Union, staying together. We can figure this out. Slavery is an issue, yes, and he's for states' rights, he is. But he's like, but we need to stay here in Congress. We can figure it out here. We just need to keep fighting the good fight, and we need to figure it out. Now, before the war, he is states' rights. That's his thing. That's how he always grew up. But he fought for this country. He served for this country. He loved this country, and he did not want to see it break apart. So he spoke hundreds of speeches trying to keep the Union together, but fix this glaring problem that it had. But when Mississippi finally seceded, he said, I have to go with my state. All the Mississippi delegates had already left. He was the only one left. When Mississippi finally turned in their paper that they were leaving, he resigned from Congress, but he did a touching farewell speech saying, hey, I'm sorry. I hope you all do well. But it's basically, I have to go with my state. I got to go with my home. But he pleaded for peace. He did not want to fight. He did not want to go to war. But he's like, but I can't go against my home, my people, my state. I know you went with your own state, but I know whether you have gone with your states or you weren't, you're going to piss people off. I don't know what I'd pick. If I had to pick the state of Ohio, or if I had to do the country, I don't know. I don't know if I could fight against my home. I'd like to say, you know what, hey, you can look at me with my red, white, and blue and my flags and my patriotism, but how do you fight against your home and your family and the place where you grew up? I can't imagine invading Akron, Ohio. I need a drink. Jefferson Davis leaves Congress. Mississippi's left. He goes back to his plantation. All right, I'm going to work my plantation, leave politics aside. I'm out of it. All right, I'm going to go to some private life. That lasts about 3 days. The Mississippi governor comes to him like, you know what? I want you to be a major general of our Mississippi Volunteers. And he agrees. Davis agrees. Okay. All right. I was at West Point. I'm up for the task. I've been a colonel. I can do that. There's an election. And unanimously is selected Jefferson Davis. Davis is not at this party. He's not at this election. A rider rides out to his house with a letter and hands him the envelope. He thinks it's probably part of his command from Montgomery, Alabama. He opens the letter and it says, you have been selected as the President of the Confederate States of America. He doesn't even tell his wife, but his wife looks and sees his face. And she's like, I immediately saw my husband's face go depressed. He's happy in his flower garden. He's doing his thing. And all of a sudden, his jaw just drops. He didn't seek it out. He didn't want it. Now, in 1 week, he's gone from senator to major general in the military to the president of the Confederacy. That's a rough week. You won an election you didn't even run for. I'm not running for president in 2024. I do not feel that Washington could use some good history. Discuss amongst yourselves. He tried to centralize the government, but people started not to support him because of that, because like, oh, you won states' rights. But he's like, I got to win the war. I got to get things done. So he starts losing support. People always like it till you're the boss. Now, I'm not going to go over the Civil War. We know the Civil War. You know Davis. He's been judged by the Civil War. 1865, he's captured. Now, we got you. Now, what are we going to do with you? Everybody else went home. When Grant basically sent and pardoned everybody, Lee, Longstreet, all the Confederate soldiers, they all went home. Davis didn't. He was chained, shackled in prison. They put 4 guards on him at all times. 1 would stay in his cell, 2 would stay outside, and there would be a commanding officer with the 2 outside, and they would switch every 15 minutes. They blamed him solely for the war. It even got to the point where the Pope sent him a crown of thorns because of why he was being treated. And he thought that was not right. They are trying to find a court case, try him for treason, but in the end they're like, we don't want the chance that he gets off. And, or, if we convict him, now he's a martyr. So after 2 years in prison, almost to the date, they let him go. He returns to Mississippi, but his assets are gone. He doesn't have his home anymore. The only money he has is Confederate, so it's basically worthless paper. He's left and destitute. I can't vote. I'm not a citizen anymore. But I'm free. Yay. What kind of a freedom is that? After the war, he moves around a lot, trying to find his niche. He can't go back to politics. He can't vote. What kind of jobs is he going to do? So a benefactor kind of takes care of him. He writes a book, The Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government. December 6, 1889, he dies. Large funeral. He's originally buried in New Orleans. That's where he was living. But he's actually now moved to Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. But now here are some fun facts that were never in your history book about Jefferson Davis. This guy was friends with Edgar Allan Poe. When he was a West Point cadet, they met at the tavern. Before Poe was eventually discharged, he was never a soldier type anyway. You went to school with Edgar Allan Poe at West Point. Now, when he got discharged, did you say, nevermore? Jefferson Davis was Secretary of War. So, what was funny is a lot of the improvements that he did actually hurt him, because when he was in the Confederate States of America, these improvements hurt him because he had to fight against his own improvements. But one of the ones he gets the most criticism for is the Camel Corps. Yes, he imported camels in to be used in the cavalry in desert situations. Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona regions. And they worked out pretty well. They were good pack animals. They were used to the desert. It worked pretty well. It was kind of successful. But when he leaves the Secretary of War, it's kind of abandoned. They're like, nah, we're not feeling these camels too much. So, half of them are sold to zoos, and the rest of them are released in the wild. No, if you're in Texas, please don't go out and start looking for camels. They're not there. They rounded them all up. Yes, the army has let them go, but eventually somebody went out there and rounded up the camels. This man, while he was a congressman, loved the idea of the Smithsonian Institution. And even though James K. Polk, he's the one who gets the credit for it because he was the president at the time, this was one of their biggest lobbyists. The Capitol building, you see the dome, you see freedom on top. This was his idea. He helped lobby for this. He helped the build on. But when he seceded, it wasn't done yet, so he never got to see it completed. And he would never come to Washington again after he left during his farewell address. In 1979, 90 years after this man was dead, President Jimmy Carter finally gave him his rights back. Let me give that to you again. 90 years after the man's been dead, gave him his rights back. But now is the perfect time to restore his voting rights that he can't use, his citizenship that he's dead, that he's in the ground. Now, we're going to start doing a tally here on the show of crazy Jimmy moments that we haven't even got to his episode. To Jefferson Davis. A lot of people today are offended by this, offended by that. And we are trying to rip that stuff out. As a teacher and a historian, you can't rip pages out of your history book because you don't like it. If you rip pages out of a story, you don't get the same story. This man, if you rip him out of your history book, you don't rip out just the Confederate States of America. You rip out American history because he was ingrained in American history before he even got to the Confederate States of America. He made a decision. You weren't there for that decision. I wasn't there for that decision. And he made the best decision he thought he could for who he was. And he paid for it. 2 years in prison, a lifetime in banishment. Jimmy Carter brought him back. I feel he's due. It's time to bring him home. Not just on a piece of paper that Carter signed. It's time to bring him home in our minds and our household. It's time to reunify. The war's over. It's time to bring him back. To Jefferson Davis. Not President Davis. To the patriot Jefferson Davis. Happy birthday, Colonel Davis. Now that's good history.
Can you wink? You can't wink? No, you can't.
That's the close I got.
No, you can't wink.
Edit the finger out.